2:14 a.m. Masked figure appears outside an 84-year-old woman's home in Tucson, Arizona. He moves slowly, carefully, almost like he already knows the property. Then he walks directly toward the porch camera, and the footage suddenly cuts. Hours later, Nancy Guthrie is gone. No forced confession. No ransom demand. No suspect. Just blood on the porch. A glove found miles away. DNA investigators still can't identify. And one terrifying question. Who was the man standing outside Nancy Guthrie's house that night? Because the deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing the case became. The porch guy wasn't acting random. He looked prepared, calculated, and possibly familiar with the family. Now, more than 100 days later, even the FBI still doesn't know where Nancy Guthrie is. But investigators are hiding evidence from the public. And online communities believe the truth may be buried somewhere inside the surveillance footage everyone keeps replaying. Tonight, we break down the timeline, the porch guy, the DNA, the hidden details, and the chilling theory that someone may already know exactly who he is. Welcome to Midnight Evidence. In tonight's case, we examine the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie and the disturbing mystery surrounding the masked figure known online as Porch Guy. Do not forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. Before the surveillance footage, before the FBI, before the internet started calling him Porch Guy, there was Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman living in the Catalina foothills area near Tucson, Arizona. A quiet neighborhood known for luxury homes, desert landscapes, and the kind of calm people assume is safe. Neighbors describe the area as peaceful, private, the type of community where unusual activity stands out immediately. And that is exactly why what happened next terrified so many people. Nancy Guthrie was known by family and friends as independent, warm, and deeply connected to the people around her. To the public, she became known nationally because of her daughter, television journalist Savannah Guthrie. But inside the family, Nancy was simply a mother, a grandmother, and someone whose routines rarely changed. That predictability would later become one of the most unsettling details in the entire case, because investigators would eventually begin asking a disturbing question. Did someone know Nancy Guthrie's routine before she disappeared? On the evening of January 31, 2026, everything still appeared normal. The home was quiet, the neighborhood calm. Nothing publicly suggested danger was approaching. But sometime after midnight, something changed. Security cameras around the property would later capture movements investigators still cannot fully explain. A figure appearing near the home, moving carefully through the darkness, almost as if he already understood the property layout. And by the time the sun rose over Tucson, Nancy Guthrie was gone. No public suspect, no confirmed motive, no clear explanation, only traces of evidence. And a mystery that would soon become one of the most discussed cases in America. But investigators say the most important clue may have appeared only minutes before Nancy vanished. A man standing outside the house, watching the porch. The surveillance footage begins at approximately 2:14 a.m. At first, nothing seems unusual. The porch is quiet. The neighborhood is silent. And then, a figure slowly appears from the darkness, dressed in dark clothing, wearing gloves, carrying what investigators later described as a black Ozark Trail backpack. The man doesn't move like someone lost. He doesn't hesitate. He walks directly toward the property, almost like he already knows where he's going. That detail would later become one of the most disturbing parts of the entire investigation, because according to investigators, the suspect appeared unusually comfortable near the home, as if the layout wasn't new to him. As the footage continues, the man can be seen pacing near the porch area, stopping, looking around, then moving closer toward the camera. Online viewers later replayed this footage thousands of times, trying to understand his movements, his posture, even the way he walked. Some believed he looked nervous. Others believed he looked prepared. But investigators noticed something else. The amount of time he spent near the porch. It was longer than many expected. And according to retired FBI analysts, that could suggest confidence or familiarity. Then suddenly, the footage cuts. And what happened in the minutes after that would transform the case into a nationwide mystery. Because by morning, Nancy Guthrie had vanished. Do not forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Because the next discovery investigators make outside the home changes the entire direction of the case. As daylight spread across the Catalina foothills on February 1, 2026, investigators arrived at Nancy Guthrie's home expecting a possible missing persons case. But within minutes, they realized this was something far more disturbing. Near the porch area, authorities discovered signs of a struggle. Blood. Enough to immediately trigger major concern. Sheriff Chris Nanos later confirmed publicly that the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie. And suddenly, the entire tone of the investigation changed. This was no longer a simple disappearance. This was now being treated as a possible abduction. Crime scene tape quickly surrounded the property. Neighbors watched from a distance as detectives moved in and out of the home. Forensic teams photographed every inch of the porch. Doorways, windows, footprints, security equipment. And investigators began reconstructing the final known moments before Nancy vanished. But there was one detail they could not ignore. The masked man seen only hours earlier. The same figure now spreading rapidly across national news broadcasts and social media. The internet quickly gave him a name. Porch Guy. And within days, millions of people were studying the footage frame by frame, trying to identify him before investigators could. Some believed the crime looked random. Others believed the suspect seemed too calm, too familiar with the property, too deliberate. Then investigators discovered something else. The porch camera itself may have been intentionally tampered with. And if that was true, it meant the person outside the home may have arrived with a plan already in mind. That possibility terrified both investigators and the public. Because random intruders don't usually know where surveillance cameras are located. And they don't usually move through quiet neighborhoods with that level of confidence. As FBI agents joined the case, the search expanded across Tucson and surrounding desert areas. Helicopters, tracking teams, road searches, digital forensic analysis, thousands of public tips. But despite all the attention, Nancy Guthrie was still missing. And the most important clue in the entire investigation had still not been identified. Days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, investigators made a discovery that sent the case in an entirely new direction. A black glove, found miles away from the home, discarded near a roadside area outside Tucson. At first, it looked like an ordinary piece of evidence. But investigators quickly realized this glove could be connected to the masked figure seen outside Nancy's home. The timing, the location, and the appearance of the glove itself immediately raised alarms. The item was sent for forensic testing. And soon, FBI laboratories became heavily involved. Investigators reportedly recovered DNA from the glove. But what happened next shocked many people following the case. The DNA did not immediately identify a suspect. No confirmed match. No public arrest. Nothing. Which meant one of two things. Either the person responsible had never been entered into the national system before, or investigators were dealing with someone who had managed to stay completely under the radar. That possibility created even more fear. Because now the public wasn't just looking at an unidentified man on surveillance footage. They were potentially looking at someone who had vanished without leaving a recognizable identity behind. And according to investigators, advanced testing on the DNA was still ongoing. Meanwhile, online communities exploded with theories. Some people believed the glove proved Porch Guy acted alone. Others believed it suggested something bigger. A planned abduction. Multiple people involved. Or even someone connected to the neighborhood itself. Retired FBI analysts later pointed out another disturbing detail. The suspect appeared unusually careful. yet somehow still left behind physical evidence. Was that a mistake? Or did the suspect think the DNA would never trace back to him? As investigators searched deeper into Nancy Guthrie's life, the mystery only became darker. Because the more evidence authorities collected, the more they started withholding from the public. Subscribe to Midnight Evidence and tell us your theory in the comments below. Because what police refused to reveal next would cause massive speculation across the internet. As the investigation intensified, something unusual started happening. Investigators stopped sharing certain details with the public. At first, most people didn't notice. But online communities following the case began pointing out that law enforcement was becoming increasingly careful with their statements. Then Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed it. Authorities were intentionally withholding evidence. According to investigators, the decision was made to protect the integrity of the case. But almost immediately, the internet exploded with questions. What exactly were police hiding? Additional surveillance footage? Vehicle evidence? Phone records? More DNA? Or something far more disturbing? Because by this point, the Nancy Guthrie case had already become one of the most heavily discussed investigations online. Reddit communities were analyzing every frame of the porch footage. YouTube channels were building timeline breakdowns. TikTok users slowed down the surveillance video, trying to identify Porch Guy from the smallest movements. The way he walked, the way he paused near the porch, even the angle of his shoulders. And as investigators released less information, public speculation only grew stronger. Some believed law enforcement was close to identifying the suspect. Others feared the opposite, that investigators had reached a dead end. But then another major development changed the emotional direction of the case. The investigation passed the 100-day mark. And for the first time, people began asking a terrifying question. What if Nancy Guthrie was never coming home? That fear changed everything. Because now, this no longer felt like an active disappearance. It felt like a mystery slowly turning cold. And despite nationwide attention, FBI involvement, surveillance footage, and over $1 million in reward money, Porch Guy still had not been identified. Subscribe to Midnight Evidence and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because the deeper investigators looked into Porch Guy, the more they started wondering whether he acted alone. By the time the case crossed 100 days, the internet had effectively launched its own investigation. Thousands of people across Reddit, YouTube, TikTok, and true crime forums were now studying the Nancy Guthrie case almost non-stop. Not just casually watching it, analyzing it, frame by frame, theory by theory. And one question kept appearing over and over again. Was Porch Guy really acting alone? Because according to many online investigators, something about the timeline felt off. Some believed the suspect looked too calm, too prepared, too familiar with the property layout. Others pointed to the way the porch camera suddenly stopped capturing footage. They argued that random intruders usually panic. But Porch Guy appeared controlled, deliberate, like someone who had already planned what he was going to do before arriving at the house. Retired FBI agents commenting publicly on the case added even more fuel to the discussion. Some suggested it was possible that someone already recognized Porch Guy, but had not come forward. Not because they didn't know him, but because they were afraid. That theory immediately spread online, because people started asking themselves a terrifying possibility. What if Porch Guy wasn't a stranger to the area at all? What if he had been seen before, without anyone realizing it? Then another theory began gaining attention. The possibility that Nancy Guthrie may have been specifically targeted, not randomly attacked. Targeted. Investigators never publicly confirmed that theory, but many people noticed details that seemed unusual. The suspect's confidence, the apparent awareness of surveillance equipment, the timing of the intrusion, and the lack of obvious theft. Because if robbery wasn't the main objective, then why was Nancy Guthrie taken? That question became the emotional center of the entire case. Why Nancy? Why this house? And why did the suspect move through the property like he had been there before? As public obsession grew, so did pressure on investigators. But despite thousands of tips, national media coverage, and FBI forensic testing, Porch Guy still remained unidentified, and some people began wondering if the answer to the mystery had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. As weeks turned into months, the emotional pressure surrounding the case became impossible to ignore. Nancy Guthrie was still missing. No confirmed sightings, no arrest, and no public explanation for what happened after the porch footage ended. But investigators were not slowing down. The FBI expanded its involvement. New forensic testing was ordered. Digital evidence continued to be analyzed, and authorities followed thousands of incoming tips from across the country. Meanwhile, Nancy's family continued making emotional public appeals, begging for answers, hoping someone somewhere knew something that could finally identify Porch Guy. Then came another major development. The reward money increased dramatically. Combined offers from the family and federal authorities reportedly climbed beyond $1 million. And that created one of the most disturbing questions in the entire case. How could someone appear on surveillance footage, become nationally recognizable, trigger one of the largest investigations in Arizona, and still not be identified? That question haunted investigators. And it haunted the public even more, because many people believed the answer was becoming impossible to ignore. Someone may already know who Porch Guy is. Maybe a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, or someone who recognized the way he walked, but never contacted police. Retired FBI agents publicly discussed that possibility, suggesting fear, loyalty, or personal connections could explain the silence. And online, theories became darker. Some people believed Porch Guy had committed crimes before. Others believed this may have been his first major mistake. But regardless of the theory, one thing became clear. The Nancy Guthrie case was no longer just an investigation. It had become an obsession. And the longer the mystery remained unsolved, the more dangerous the speculation became. Because eventually, people stopped asking whether Porch Guy would be identified, and started asking whether investigators already knew more than they were willing to say. Then the investigation took another unexpected turn. Sheriff Chris Nanos revealed that he was no longer personally communicating with the Guthrie family. Instead, communication would now move primarily through detectives and federal investigators. The announcement immediately triggered new speculation online. People started asking why. What changed behind the scenes? Was it simply procedure? Or had tensions inside the investigation started growing? Authorities never suggested misconduct. But in high-profile cases like this, silence often creates its own theories, and the internet filled the gaps almost instantly. Some believed investigators were closer to solving the case than the public realized. Others believed the opposite, that despite the FBI, the surveillance footage, the glove, and the DNA evidence, investigators still didn't know who Porch Guy really was. But behind the scenes, forensic testing continued. The unknown DNA recovered from evidence connected to the case remained one of the investigation's most important clues. According to reports, advanced analysis was still underway, and investigators appeared determined not to reveal everything they knew. That decision only intensified public obsession, because many viewers noticed something unsettling about the official statements. Authorities repeatedly referred to Porch Guy carefully, precisely, almost as if they were avoiding revealing details only the suspect would know. And if that was true, it meant investigators might already possess evidence they considered extremely sensitive. Maybe additional surveillance, maybe forensic results, or maybe something recovered from the property that has never been publicly discussed. Then another disturbing theory started gaining traction online. What if Porch Guy wasn't watching the house for the first time that night? What if he had studied the property earlier, learning routines, camera locations, and the quietest hours of the neighborhood? Because the deeper people looked into the timeline, the less random the crime appeared. And if this was planned, then investigators may not just be searching for a suspect. They may be searching for someone who spent time preparing for Nancy Guthrie long before she disappeared. At some point, the public stopped waiting for answers and started trying to solve the case themselves. Entire online communities became obsessed with the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Reddit threads stretched for thousands of comments, TikTok creators replayed the porch footage frame by frame. YouTube channels built timeline reconstructions, trying to map every movement porch guy made that night. People analyzed his height, his posture, the angle of his shoulders, even the way he paused near the camera. Some believed he looked nervous. Others believed he looked experienced. But one detail continued haunting almost everyone following the case. Porch guy never appeared rushed. That observation created a terrifying possibility. What if he already knew how much time he had? Online theories became more aggressive as months passed. Some viewers believed investigators were protecting key evidence. Others believed the suspect had personal ties to the neighborhood. And a growing number of people became convinced this was never random. Because according to many internet investigators, random criminals do not usually study surveillance cameras. They don't calmly move through expensive neighborhoods. And they rarely disappear this completely afterward. Retired federal investigators later discussed another possibility. The suspect may have made mistakes. But not enough mistakes. Which meant either porch guy got extremely lucky, or he understood investigations better than people realized. That idea terrified many viewers online, because it suggested the person responsible may have carefully prepared long before Nancy Guthrie vanished. Then another chilling thought started spreading across the internet. What if the person investigators are searching for has already watched every documentary about this case? Every news report, every theory, every public update, possibly sitting quietly somewhere, knowing nobody has identified him yet. And if that's true, then porch guy may already know exactly how close investigators really are. Subscribe to Midnight Evidence and drop your theory in the comments below, because the final pieces of the Nancy Guthrie mystery raise one last terrifying question. Was porch guy hiding in plain sight the entire time? Today, Nancy Guthrie is still missing. No confirmed suspect has been publicly identified. No arrest has been announced. And the man known online as Porch Guy remains one of the most recognizable unidentified figures in America. The surveillance footage still circulates online. Millions of people have watched it, studied it, slowed it down, trying to notice something investigators may have missed. A movement, a limp, a habit. Anything that could finally reveal who was standing outside Nancy Guthrie's home at 2:14 in the morning. But despite the FBI, the DNA testing, the reward money, and the nationwide attention, the mystery remains unsolved. And maybe that is the most disturbing part of all. Because cases like this make people question how safe ordinary life really is. A quiet neighborhood, security cameras, luxury homes, national attention, and still, someone vanished. Without answers. Investigators continue to insist the case is active. That evidence is still being processed. And that critical details are being intentionally withheld from the public. Which means somewhere inside this investigation, there may already be a clue capable of changing everything. Maybe DNA. Maybe surveillance. Maybe a witness who has remained silent. Or maybe someone who recognized Porch Guy immediately, but never contacted authorities. And until that final piece appears, the mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie will continue haunting investigators, the internet, and the people who watched that porch footage wondering who was really standing in the dark. So we leave you with one final question. Was Porch Guy a complete stranger? Or someone much closer to the family than anyone first imagined? Comment your theory below. And subscribe to Midnight Evidence for more true crime investigations, unsolved mysteries, and disturbing case breakdowns. But even after everything investigators revealed, one question still refuses to disappear. What happened in the minutes the camera didn't record? Because according to investigators, the most important part of the timeline may exist inside a gap nobody outside law enforcement has fully seen. And that missing gap has become one of the darkest parts of the entire case. Online investigators believe those missing minutes could explain everything. How Nancy Guthrie disappeared, whether Porch Guy acted alone, and what really happened after the camera went dark. Some theories claim the suspect entered the home immediately. Others believe Nancy may have recognized whoever was outside. A possibility investigators have never confirmed publicly. But if true, it could completely change how people understand the case. Because strangers usually force their way in. But someone familiar might not need to. That theory alone has fueled endless debate online. And every time authorities release another update, the speculation grows stronger, especially because investigators continue repeating one statement. This remains an active investigation, which means the story is not over. Not yet. Somewhere, there may still be surveillance investigators haven't released. Someone may still be withholding information. And Porch Guy, whoever he really is, may still believe he got away with it. But history has shown something about cases like this. Eventually, people make mistakes. DNA technology improves. Witnesses speak. And secrets begin to crack. The question is whether that moment will come soon enough to finally reveal what happened to Nancy Guthrie, or whether this mystery will remain unsolved. Long after the porch footage fades from public memory, and perhaps the most chilling part of the Nancy Guthrie case, is that investigators believe somebody out there may already hold the missing piece. A name, a memory, a tiny detail that once seemed unimportant. Maybe someone remembers a man suddenly acting differently after February 1, 2026. Maybe someone noticed unexplained injuries, strange behavior, a vehicle cleaned unexpectedly, or someone becoming obsessed with coverage of the case. Because according to former investigators, people connected to crimes often follow the investigations closely, watching, listening, trying to learn what police know. And if Porch Guy has been doing that, then he has also seen the public reaction, the fear, the outrage, the endless replaying of the surveillance footage. He knows millions of people are searching for him. Yet somehow, he still remains unidentified. That reality has deeply unsettled the Tucson community, because the longer the mystery continues, the more impossible it feels. A man appears on camera. An 84-year-old woman vanishes. Blood is found at the scene. DNA evidence is recovered. The FBI launches a massive investigation. And still, no answers, no arrests, no closure, only questions. Questions that continue haunting investigators, Nancy's family, and everyone who has followed the case from the very beginning. Maybe the truth is buried somewhere inside evidence the public has never seen. Or maybe, the answer has already appeared in front of millions of people, without anyone realizing it. Until then, the image of Porch Guy standing silently outside Nancy Guthrie's home remains one of the most disturbing unanswered mysteries in recent true crime history. Tonight, Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The FBI investigation remains active. The DNA evidence has still not publicly identified the man known as Porch Guy. And investigators continue withholding critical details from the public. But despite the unanswered questions, one image continues haunting the internet more than anything else. The figure standing silently outside Nancy Guthrie's home at 2:14 in the morning. Watching. Waiting. Moving through the property with a level of confidence many people still cannot explain. Over time, online theories began growing darker. Some people believed Porch Guy had studied the home beforehand. Others believed he may have had some kind of connection to Nancy Guthrie's world. A theory fueled by the way he appeared so familiar with the property. Names began circulating online, including discussions involving Dominic Evans. But investigators have never publicly identified Dominic Evans as a suspect, and no official evidence released by authorities has connected him to the disappearance. Still, the speculation never stopped, because people continue asking the same terrifying question. How does someone appear on surveillance footage, trigger one of the largest investigations in Arizona, become nationally recognizable, and still remain unidentified? Maybe the answer is hidden somewhere inside evidence the public has never seen. Maybe someone out there already recognizes Porch Guy, but has stayed silent. Or maybe, the truth behind Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is even darker than anyone realizes. Until investigators finally reveal what happened, the mystery of the Porch Guy will continue haunting Tucson, the internet, and everyone who watched that surveillance footage wondering who was really standing in the dark. What do you think happened to Nancy Guthrie? Comment your theory below. And subscribe to Midnight Evidence for more true crime investigations, unsolved mysteries, and disturbing case breakdowns.